welcome to today's webinar. This is Saving Time on Managing Finances with Church360 Ledger. It's an overview webinar where we'll cover the main features of Church360 Ledger, but we'll have the special focus on those time-saving tools that are included within it. My name is Peter Frank, and I am the Senior Manager of Concordia Technology Solutions. My contact information is there on the screen. Anytime that you'd like to reach out to me, send me an email or give me a phone call. Email is the better way to reach me because I'm not in my office too often. But I'm here today and you've got my undivided attention because I've turned my phone off. So thank you for being with me today. I'm excited to present Ledger to you. I've been working on this product for pretty much its entirety on the product development, direction, and marketing side. We have programmers who actually build it, and they do a far better job than I could ever do. But I've been with our group here in CTS for it's going on 6 years, and right when I started is when Ledger was beginning to be created. So we launched it a couple of years after that. So I'm excited to show this off to you. A couple housekeeping items before we begin. First off, my plan is for today to go 50 minutes. Now, I have more than enough material to cover 50 minutes. I often go over, but I'd like to try to leave 10 minutes for questions. Now, in order to do this, I need to make sure we have enough questions to fill 10 minutes, so please ask them throughout. I have a queue up there that I keep an eye on and make sure that I have enough time to answer the questions that are coming in, so don't wait till the very end. As something comes to your mind, go ahead and put it in there. We will be recording this webinar, so if you are watching this after the fact, thank you for joining us. If you're watching it live, thank you for being here and taking time out of your day to watch with me as I present. The advantage for you is you get to ask those questions, so thank you very much for being here. Now, if you're not familiar with Concordia Technology Solutions, we are the church administration division of Concordia Publishing House. And here at CPH, we have been producing software for churches since 1984. We've been producing materials for churches since 1869, so quite a while. We're almost at 150 years. But even so, 1984 is a long time to be producing software, so we have a really good history with our customers and learning their technology needs and how we can serve them. And so we went to market with the name Concordia Technology Solutions probably about 15 years ago or so, just to kind of separate it, make sure you know that we do indeed have software here at the publishing house. All right, so the software we're talking about today is a web application called Church360 Ledger. I'm assuming you know that since you're watching, but if not, that's what the focus will be on today. Now, Church360 Ledger is part of the suite of products called Church360, and included within that suite is also Church360 Members and Church360 Unite. So while Ledger is all about the finances of the church, Members is about the people, their attendance, their offerings, and we'll talk about offerings in a little while, how that works into Ledger. And then Unite is our church website builder, and that helps you to build a communication hub for your congregation. It unites all these communication tools in one place. I presented on both Members and Unite over the last 2 days. Yesterday was Unite, Tuesday was Members. So if you'd like to watch those videos, they are available on our YouTube channel and in our resource center. So we won't go into those in much detail at all today. The focus will be on Ledger. So Church360 Ledger, like I mentioned, it's online church finance software. We have built it to be intuitive, secure, and focused. And I'll get into a little bit more detail on what that actually means in a few moments. Before we get too far on the materials, though, I'd like to explain a few assumptions I have made about you who are attending today. First off, I'm assuming you are familiar with church finances. Otherwise, you wouldn't be here today. If you are starting off and have never touched a ledger before, don't know what a T-chart is, you've maybe not even balanced your checkbook, this is probably not the webinar for you. But you don't have to be an expert by any means. So just assuming there's some familiarity, I may throw some terms out there. If you are not sure what I mean, you can put in the chat. But yeah, at least familiar with church finances. I'm assuming you're new to Church360 Ledger. If you are a longtime user of Ledger, most of this will be very familiar to you. But even if you've been using it for a little while, there's still going to be plenty that you can pick up from here. Our most advanced users probably won't gain too much value from this presentation. So lastly, I'm assuming you're extremely busy, and I've yet to meet somebody who is working or volunteering for a church who is not extremely busy. So if this is not helpful to you or you have to step away, don't worry about it. We're recording it for one thing, so you can always watch it after the fact, but I really want this to be helpful to you and provide value to you, so that's why I'm here. All right, so I'm going to jump into our outline. The goal for today is to first go through a brief overview of Church360 Ledger and kind of our reasons behind why we made it the way we did. Give you an overview of the features within there, but then we're going to go through the tour of the software. And I've outlined the time-saving tools. We'll touch on just about everything within it, and I'll highlight those key things that save you time. And then, like I mentioned, the last 10 minutes or so will be dedicated to question and answers. Now, if I don't have questions in the queue, I'll probably go over that 50 minutes, but I won't go over the hour. I want to make sure to respect your time and end it right at that 60-minute mark. So before we get into viewing the software, I'd like to explain a little bit about what are the thoughts behind Church360 Ledger. What was going through our minds as we built it, as we evaluated it, as we continue to evaluate it. Well, first off, church finances are often managed by volunteers. We know this. I'm sure you in the church know this. If you are a finance professional, maybe a CPA, and you're volunteering at your church, that's great that you have that understanding. And I'll see that with a lot of people, that they take what they know in the secular world in their jobs of finance and apply that to the church. And so we know that you're not in the church on a daily basis. And if you're not a financial person by trade, but you're assisting with church finances, you're also probably not working in the church. Only the larger churches, or those who are blessed to have a on-staff finance manager, are really the exception to the rule. And so as we built Church360 Ledger, we kept that in mind. We definitely don't want to exclude those who are working in the church every day. We just know that's not as common. Now, when you have volunteers, you often have it where volunteers are not accountants. And in fact, I even put here, most volunteers are not accountants. And that's because most churches can't afford accountants on their payroll. And so that's why they end up being volunteers in the evenings and weekends. If you're really lucky, you might get a volunteer accountant who is retired and is available during the day. So, and of course, luck has nothing to do with that. If the Lord has called you to serve in that way, then those churches are blessed by your service. Okay, next up, accountability is even more important in the church. Now, we can talk about accountability in the broad sense, but we're really focusing on accountability in finances today. And unfortunately, it seems like you can't go too long without hearing of somebody who's embezzled from a church or misused church funds. Hopefully that doesn't get on the news, but I've seen many stories on the news. And so as we have built Church360 Ledger, we have this goal in mind of knowing that we can't stop people from doing bad things within the finances if they're really intending to do ill. However, we can make it difficult, and we can track everything that goes through. And that's a key part of this, is that accountability, tracking all of the transactions. And really that goes back to saving time too. If we make it easy to find what happened and when and by whom, that saves you a lot of time, even as you're just reviewing finances, not even trying to find anything bad. So accountability is even more important in the church than in businesses, because the money that is managed within the church is all going to sharing the gospel. So what better goal than sharing the gospel? That's why accountability is important. All right, we also know, and this is something that we hear a lot, is that, well, my church is different than the average church. We certainly know churches are different than businesses, but most churches are unique in how they operate. And most software out there is developed for businesses. There's a big market for finance software for businesses, small businesses especially. We take a different approach and understand that no business is going to want to use Church360 Ledger, because it's not going to have everything a business needs, but it does have the things that a church needs. And so that's what we focused on as we built Ledger. All right, the topic for today, how to save time with finances. And there's a few key things that I'm going to focus on. Oops, wrong direction. First off, keep the chart of accounts simple. And I have seen some very complex charts of accounts. And we'll go through how easy it is to set up something, how easy it is to assign dollars to restricted funds. That's where we're going to start off the presentation today. Next, make informed budgeting decisions. And this is saving time on the front end and on the back end. So if the budgeting process is easier and you can quickly pull the information that you need and review the information that you need to make wise decisions on budgeting, then that will save you from having to do many other tasks in the future. So if you are budgeting correctly, then hopefully you won't have to address the needs associated with coming under budget on income or over budget on expenses. Wise decisions will save you time later on. And so whatever we can do within Church360 Ledger to provide you that information, we'll do. So we'll take a look at that in a little bit too. Don't do the same work twice. This is not just a principle that you want to apply to finances. Really, you want to apply that in all areas of your life. So I'll show you how we do that in a variety of different ways. Get the transactions right the first time. Journal entries can be difficult to do. If not difficult, they're at least time consuming and unnecessary if we get it right the first time. So we're going to look at how the transaction process works to make sure that, that everything comes out right at the beginning. And finally, sharing access, not reports. I know how difficult it can be to share the right information in the right format for the right people. We have built Church360 Ledger so that it is designed for more people to get in there with proper permissions so that they can see what they need, as opposed to printing out and passing out reports and answering questions and follow-up reports, how that often goes in the church. So those are our 5 key areas that we're going to be looking at in terms of saving time today. Let's go ahead and get started. I'll switch gears here. Oops. Oh, and it looks like I was reviewing budgets. We're going to start actually on the home page here. Okay, so I know that you're watching this on a screen, and hopefully you have got it full screen so you can see a little bit more detail. I have a rather large monitor, so what I'm going to do is zoom in so that you can see a little bit. Now, Ledger, whenever we review this, it's a little bit difficult because you're dealing with numbers and small text. And so when you're watching a webinar, you can't always see the details, and that's okay. The information I'm going to share today is not real information. It's not a real church. There are no real transactions. And as you see that, you might, as I was looking at the numbers of this demo database that we have here, the income looks really high considering just how often, how we have it associated on the membership side of things. So very wealthy congregation. All right, so first off, we're going to go and take a look. Actually, before I go there, let me show you the navigation. I just so ingrained in me where everything is that I forget that sometimes people don't know everything. So up in the top left, you'll see where it says General. When you click on that, it also shows General. There's not much to do with this if you have only one set of books, but if you are managing a ministry with multiple sets of books, maybe church and school, you can have those multiple sets of books within Ledger under your one account. And I know many congregations may not have a school, but they may have a men's club or a youth fund or some other group that's managing money and needs a place to store that information. Well, Ledger is a great place for that. Below that, you'll have what we call the Omnibar. This allows you to jump to any account very, very quickly. And you can even type ahead and start searching, and it filters the list down. So if you're looking for youth, all you have to do is type in youth and click on it and go. So that is how you access funds quickly. To the right, we have our check queue. We have our reports, we have our settings, and our user information. Now, depending on if you have this synced with a church management software or with with our Paychex payroll system that we partner with Paychex on, you might see a pending transaction icon up there as well when there are transactions that need to be entered in. So just something that I wanted to point out, this database doesn't have that, and that's not a huge part of the presentation that we normally do. So just want to highlight that. And over on the far right, you have new transactions, and we'll get into that in quite a bit of detail. So that is going to be at the top of every page, regardless of where you're at in the software. Anything in the white and below will change. Okay, so let's go into settings and charts of accounts. There we go. All right, so we have our 4 types of accounts, which if you're not familiar with that, it's assets, which is real money, bank accounts and the like. Liabilities, real money, but money that you owe. Something like, in a personal finance world, your credit cards. In the church world, it might be your mortgage. So that's liabilities. Income is the money coming in, and of course, expenses is the money coming out. So it has this kind of rolling system where you can open one at a time and not have that super lengthy list. Now, within each one of these, we're going to start off at assets because that seems to be the most tangible thing in terms of how to describe. You have 2 types of lines here. The lines that have the, or the rows, I should say, that have the dark lines on the left, those are categories. Think of them like folders for accounts. They can't actually conduct transactions, but they can summarize the accounts that are in the tree underneath them. And so, for example, the first one is Central Trust. That's the name of the bank we use. We have a checking account there and a savings account there. Now, if you had multiple checking accounts, you could put them under there and nest them underneath that, or multiple savings. We got one of each. And this is more just for demonstration purposes. To add a new account, we click down here, New Account, and it'll tell me what this is. And I'm going to go ahead and save this as, well, the example that I'm going to use today is starting up a cancer care ministry. And I like that one because it has enough associated transactions that are tangible and understandable that it's kind of clear. Now, you may not have a separate checking account. In this case, we are. And so we're going to call it Cancer Care Ministry. And over on the right, you can see account number. One of the ways that we save time, and this is a minor thing, but you are not required to put an account number in there. We have plenty of internal account numbers that manage all the finances and keep it right. And it really doesn't serve as much purpose as the name of the account. So if you have an account number system that you'd like to put in place, you can put it in there, but you don't have to. And then we have the initial balance. Now, once you start making transactions, you can't set an initial balance. That's really just for that first time. So we're going to put that as 0 and that you can write checks. And we're going to create that. And I'm going to drag and drop that up under checking under Central Trust. And I'll bump it in 1. There we go. And that is how we do it. Now, that transaction or that account can start taking transactions after I save it, which I'm going to do right now, and say 1 new account created, confirm. Now, if I wanted to do that as a subset or a restricted fund from our general checking account, maybe it doesn't need its own account, but I want to reserve the monies in that account for Cancer Care Ministry, I can go over here to this new restricted fund right under or right to the side of the Central Trust checking. Click that button and say, okay, we're going to do Cancer Care Restricted Fund and save that. Do the naming a little bit different. Now, what that automatically does for me the first time I add a restricted fund is it creates an unrestricted account within checking. So you'll see that here, Central Trust Checking, unrestricted, and it puts the name in there, Cancer Care Restricted Fund. Now, I can still go in here and see totals and everything. I can't assign account numbers because it's not an actual account, but it lets me see within this bank account, how do I have that divvied up? And you can have more and more restricted funds. It won't create an unrestricted for each one. You only get 1 unrestricted fund for checking, which is all you need. But that's a way to set the money aside and make sure that, that it's used for that specific purpose. All right, we'll go ahead and save changes. 2 new accounts created, the unrestricted and the restricted. All right, moving up. That is how you create accounts. If you have any questions about this, please go ahead and put it in the chat. I'd be happy to talk more about it. But now we're going to move into budgets. So after you set up your chart of accounts, you want to set budgets for it. Now, we understand that you don't set budgets for asset accounts because it doesn't really matter how much is in the account at a given time as long as there's enough. But budgets for income and expense are how you plan out your year, how you practice good stewardship principles, how you make sure you have enough income to counteract the expenses that you have. So up underneath settings, I did that really quickly. I clicked on budgets and I come to this view here. Now, depending on how much you have zoomed in, and I'm going to zoom in and out for a second, go to 100%. You could get all 12 months plus a total plus a description row on the screen. And as you zoom in, it tries to keep that as much, but there's a minimum width that has to be in there. So we're not going to hit that. It's not going to show all 12 columns with this zoomed in the way it is. But I just want to make you aware of that because many people aren't if they're zoomed in, but they're like, how do I see all 12? All right, so budgets are broken down by income and expense in anything that is a category, meaning that it doesn't carry a balance within within that subset. It's a summary of balances, is a gray line, and all the white lines are actual accounts. These are the income accounts, and if you scroll down, then you have the expense accounts. And as you get all the way down to the bottom, you have income less expense. Now, right now, we have a bunch of zeros. And there's a couple ways that you can fill this out quickly and easily. One would be to just go click in each one and enter in your amount and tab over. There we go. It's going a little slow. Anytime I do a live webinar, the feed slows down my internet connection, so I do apologize for that. So you can go through and type in and add in month by month what you want. Or I shouldn't say what you want. Month by month, what is realistic, but I think you understand. All right, then the other way you could do it is you could go into the total and say, all right, I'm going to put $600 as my total, and it'll automatically split it up by the 12 months for you. And you can still go and adjust and say, okay, in February, I think I'm actually going to get 100. It'll bump up that total there. So it's not a way to lock in, okay, this is split evenly over 12 months. It's a way to quickly add in monthly budgets and then manage the exceptions. Now, another thing that you can do as you're budgeting is you can change all of the budgets to last year's budget and put that in as a starting point. You can also change all of them to last year's actuals and put that in as a starting point. Again, it doesn't have to be your ending point, but it gives you something to work off of. Also, within each row, when you click on it, you can select by month previous year's budget or previous year's actuals, and just click on that. I guess that was already clicked on. There we go. And change it, and everything else will update from there. There's one more way to save time doing budgets. If you export to Excel, we'll go ahead and do that. There's quite a bit of account data in here. There we go. Slowly, Excel is opening. Where did that go? Here we go. Let me show you how this looks. And I know from experience with churches that often when you're doing the budgeting, it's easiest to just send spreadsheets to your ministry leaders and say, okay, tell me what you want. What do you think you're going to need? Fill it out, put the reasoning behind there, and we'll see what we can do. So it gives you this blank slate to then go in and say, all right, Vacation Bible School. I'm going to go ahead and say our big push for donations is in March, $300. We'll get it again in April, $500 in May, $1,000 in June. Now what you can do, you could do this either as a whole or by row and copy and paste that. And then if we go back into the budget, so VBS, in January and paste it, it'll paste all those values in there for you. And so if you keep the spreadsheet in the same format, let me go back. And just know where you start. Even the rows that don't take dollars can be populated because it only pastes in those rows where you can enter things in, and it'll skip the ones that they don't. So it's a pretty clever way. It's a little bit hidden because it's just copy paste, but it makes that process go very quickly for you. So budgeting was a big concern for our customers. We need to be able to do this well and quickly and easily. And so we built all of these different things in here. And the one I didn't mention, but you can kind of assume for watching how I do it, is all the keyboard shortcuts. You know, you can go through and quickly and easily do that with a keyboard and a 10 key only. All right, moving forward. Oops, let me get my outline. I have the budget thing open in two places. That's why I was taking a while. The next thing is multiple transactions. So you'll remember that when we were talking about it, or multiple transaction paths, we had keep the chart of accounts simple, make informed budgeting decisions, and don't do the same work twice. This kind of goes along with getting the transactions right the first time. And in fact, I'm probably, as I think now, probably should have switched those two around. But we're going to talk about them together. All right, so going up here and clicking on new transaction. There are 5 transaction paths for you. So what we call multiple transaction paths. It doesn't mean that the transactions on paper end up being different. If you're familiar with cost accounting, T-chart accounting, where you have credits and debits, that happens for every single one. Now, in the end, what we're creating are a bunch of journal entries. And so we're going to go to journal entry first, which means you have an account and you credit or debit that account, and then you have something that is an offset of that. And for people like me who don't have a finance background, credits and debits can be confusing. And in fact, I have up there on my bulletin board, you can't see that, a little cheat sheet that tells me, okay, if I want to increase an asset account, I need to debit it. And if I need to decrease it, I need to credit it. Well, unrestricted, I already switched those up. If I want to move $500, let's go ahead and delete that, from unrestricted to restricted for cancer care, I need to decrease credit my asset, and I need to debit to increase my asset. Those are both asset accounts. And if I could get the credits and debits right in my head, then I would be able to do it right. Now, this may seem, if you're a finance person, this may seem second nature, and you'd be like, what is Peter doing trying to withdraw money by debiting an asset? Don't worry, we have a solution for that, because there's plenty of other people like me who are helping with church finances who don't understand that. So I can do here a transfer and say, okay, my transfer is my from account. Oops. And I'm going to transfer $500, and my asset account is my cancer care restricted. Now, not only does it go ahead and get the credit and debits right from the beginning, you see that it marked 500 for the credits, whoops. It also filled in my amount over here. And so if I say, okay, well, actually, it's not the full 500, 328.32 is going to be moved to cancer care. To balance that transaction, I need another asset account. And so I might do that to this other cancer care ministry bank account that I made, checking account. That seems a little silly that you would have the transfer and really a withdrawal and deposit from one account to the next. So transferring from an unrestricted to a restricted and one account to another probably isn't going to happen in the same transaction. But really, from a financial general ledger side of things, that's what you're doing, is you're just crediting one and debiting the others. And so it does as much of it as it can for you without doing it automatically, because it can't. We need to know the intention. Now, every transaction will have a memo field and a date field, and then depending on what is included in that transaction will determine what types of accounts are available. So I'll go ahead and save that just to give me some balances in those new accounts. And then I'll come back here to my home. And all you have to do is hit that $sign to get to the home. I'll go in here and we have some upcoming transactions that were put in here with a future date. But you see here, there is my transaction. And when I click on it, I get to see everything. Now, we'll get into editing transactions in a minute. I will want to do that, but let me go back up here and do deposit. So deposit is a different kind of transaction. Now, with a deposit, you may have a payee, so we make that as optional. And this is just if you want to track money by specific individuals or specific companies. But in here, you can see a deposit is going into an asset account. And, oops, if I did that right, into unrestricted 500. The income account will only show you income accounts. So it already filters down the list and say, okay, well, we got that through the $500 that went into the general fund. And so we'll save that. And maybe something like this is offerings for the week. All right, there we go. That was really easy because I didn't even have to think. I just know my first one is my asset, where's the money going, and then it'll do the rest for me by showing me just income. And in the same way, a payment will do the reverse of that. So you can have liabilities as payment, and that gets into some financial stuff that I don't think we need to get into today. It doesn't really highlight it. But if we are paying from, let's say, the Cancer Care Restricted Fund, and we're paying for the coffee at our Cancer Care Ministry, that's really expensive coffee, let's do $25. Then I have to determine where to expense it. Now, liability is available there as well, because if I'm putting it on a credit card, that's where I would put it. Or I do the liability on this side, the credit card, and then do the expense here. Either way, it'll still work out the way that I need to. All right, so let's see which account. I'm going to just do it as event expense. And so because I'm taking money out of this asset, $25 is crediting, I'm applying it to the expense. $25 is being debited. So here's what I can do: refreshments for Cancer Care Ministry. I guess just I forgot the word count on there. There you go. There is my memo. So that works out quite well. And let's see here. So I am on assets. I wonder why the expense isn't showing there. That's right, that's asset and liability. So if I go here into expense, there we can see the event expense. I can also click on any one of those counts and go directly to that. I often forget about that. That's a quick way of going. Let me show you one other way to navigate before I get too far. You can also click on these mini graphs. And so if you want to navigate down, you go assets, and then central trust, and then central trust, and then checking, central trust checking, and Cancer Care Restricted Fund. That takes a little while. That's why we recommend using this omnibar here and say Cancer Care Restricted Fund, and all you have to do is click on that, and it'll take you through that navigation. But I just want to point out that you have that breadcrumb. So navigation, there's a number of ways you can do that. All right, the check payment type is very similar to a payment, except it also creates a check that you can either print or just track as having written. And this is one of our other time-saving tools that's not a big thing, is that we work with an organization that sells custom checks. So you can put your bank account information on there, your church's information, just like you might order checks from for your personal checking account. You can order these for your church. However, they're highly secure. They can't be counterfeited. They are just really durable and high quality. So Forms Plus Inc., there's information on our website. They're who we partner with on that, and they have a proprietary setup that we utilize. So that is for checks, and we'll get into check queue in a little while there. All right, so that is transactions. That goes into getting the transactions right the first time. If you mess up the credits and debits, the way to adjust that would be through a journal entry, which is that last transaction type. But there's another way to do that which gets you to the same end. So let's go up here and say, I don't know what I was thinking. These odd numbers don't actually matter. I really wanted to do 175 and 325. And just edit that and save it. Now, The accountants who might be watching will say, well, no, you can't just change that transaction. You need to have an audit trail for that, because that's how people embezzle money, by changing transactions that already occurred in your official records. Well, no fear. Whenever you make an edit to a transaction that's been created, it'll automatically create a journal entry. And so we can type in amendment memo wrong amounts and save. All right, now if you look over here, my new totals on that transaction are what I just entered, but there is a little arrow by it, and anytime you hover over it, it says this transaction has been edited. And so you can see the difference by line, what changed. Now, I'll point out something else to you. Up here under reports, you also have an event log. And now this last thing that I did, now take a look at the event log because it's pretty cool. You get the timestamp, exact second, the action, the type, the user. So you may know if it's Peter Frank who's making this. And then you can say it's not edited that first transaction. It's created a new transaction, which is a revision of this first one. So if I go to this new transaction, it shows me that 332 that I switched from one to the other and puts it in the right credits and debits and everything. So I really made two transactions, the first one that's incorrect and the second one that's fixed. But what I've done in the process is I haven't created the journal entry on my own. I could have gone and done this exact journal entry, but I had to think through that process. And especially if you don't have that knowledge, it's going to be hard to get that fixed. But I also didn't have to go and just do a journal entry. I just went into the transaction and said, what is it supposed to be? And Ledger does the rest for me. So that's one of those other time-saving tools. As you know, obviously we did a presentation on it. There's a lot of them. All right, another thing that I want to talk about. Let's go ahead and create a new transaction, a payment. And we'll do Cancer Care Ministry and $25. And we will say that this is going to, let's say lawn care. Let's say the Cancer Care Ministry, as part of their service to the congregation, provides flowers for the altar, or, well, no, it is actually lawn care. We'll say flowers outside. I was going too far into the flowers there. So let's say every month they're buying a $25 potted plant to put outside, and they're growing this beautiful garden out there. So you could put in this transaction and say save, or you could make this reoccurring. And this reoccurring one would say, monthly potted plant. Silly example, I know. Potted. Every single month on the second Thursday, and click save. Reoccurring transaction was created. What that means now is you'll have a record and you'll get a notice in the upcoming transactions icon that'll pop up here when it becomes the second Thursday of the month. I think that's what I put. And what you can do is go under settings and see all your reoccurring transactions. And so you can create this collection of them so that when they occur, you can put them in. Now you have the opportunity to change the transaction before you submit it. So if maybe next month it's $24.92, well, you can change that there without going to the recurring transaction. And so you could do estimates here. If it's always the same, you could do always the same. When you think about things like payroll, it doesn't change too much. Once you set up that transaction the first time, it'll be a lot easier to do that in the future if you make it recurring. Now, payroll is one where we integrate with Paychecks and they provide the files. That makes it really easy. Offerings is another one where you might have various offerings, but your structure of the transaction will be the same. Each one of those things takes time the first time you do it, but if you make it recurring, you don't have to do it again. And that goes back to that, don't do the same work twice. If you're going to set up a transaction, especially a complex one, get it set up once, get it set up right, and then reuse that time and time again. Another way you can do that is if you have a transaction, you're like, oh, I remember we did that last time. You can go to that transaction and say copy. Oh, this is a different one. apparently we use lawn care quite a bit as an example. So I can go in and copy that. Now this is a new one. I change the date, I can change the amounts, and I can go down and save. Basically just changing the exceptions or changing what changed last time without having to retype everything into it. So another time-saving trick. All right, let's see. We're good on time. I talked about importing offerings, talked about importing payroll. We're not going to show that today just because that's a longer process. The tools themselves save time, but in and of themselves, they're always going to be a longer process, especially payroll, as you know, I'm sure, if you're working in the church office. Let me show you reconciliation next, and then we'll get into check printing. So assets are the only accounts that need to be reconciled or can be reconciled. Actually, I take that back. I'm trying to remember if we put that in under liabilities. Let's see here. Yes, we do. So, or was that still under assets? Yeah, that was still under assets. I didn't go to liabilities. I don't think we have that because it's under, it's just under assets, because I was thinking about credit cards and balancing that. But assets is when you get the bank statement and you want to go reconcile it with the bank statement. You go down to that account level, so central trust checking, but we're not going to go down all the way to the level of unrestricted and restricted, because really that money is all in one account. And to the bank, they don't know the difference between the dollar in one fund and the dollar in the other. So restricted funds are mixed in with unrestricted. But that's why you have something like Ledger to help you keep track of that. So when you go to reconcile this account, it goes into this very different mode. We jokingly called it the Hulk mode because it's so bright green. But it really gives you this understanding that, okay, I'm doing something much different here today. So the way this would work is you'd pick the statement date and say, okay, on this PDF that I got from my bank or physical copy of my statement has this date on it. And then I'm going to go through and say, okay, my starting range was 169,841.55. Our starting balance, my ending balance was 170,887.02. How do I get there? And then you start reviewing each transaction and clicking on it until you get to the point where you have checked off all the transactions, and now you see you're off by 0. So once you get the right amount in there and balanced all the transactions, the ones that are left, so let's say, we have got these at the top. You'll know the ones that are left are not reconciled. And so you have this continuous list that keeps getting shrunk, and it grows as you make transactions and shrinks as you reconcile it. And gives you that real easy tool to balance with your bank account and find those discrepancies if there are any. So we'll go ahead and save that. Now, once you save those transactions, let me go down to, you get this check mark that says this has been reconciled. You can't make adjustments from here because you've already said this is what's with the bank. And so any future edits to that, maybe it's the wrong expense account, would have to be a journal entry. But it makes life a lot easier when you can go through and see this. So, all right. Next up, we're going to go over here to event log. Yes, so reconciling 7 items. If you want to go and print this reconciliation for your records, that's in the event log. Most people don't because once you have everything in Ledger, you can always go back and view it, but you can do that here in the event log and print that out. All right, the next thing I'd like to show is check printing. We talked about that. Let's make an example. So let's say we want to pay Concordia Publishing House, my parent company. That is one of the payees that we have here. Let me take you to payees first. So under settings, you can go to payees and publishing. You can always add a new pay too, but when you click on it, this is where you can put in company information or people information, notes. It all stays in there and allows you to track the transactions. You can also go to view the history and see what has happened, what kind of transaction line items have occurred. So we're going to go back here to check. And we're going to say Concordia Publishing House. And we're going to spell it right. And I'm going to say it's coming from unrestricted, and we're going to say it's 1:25 a.m. Do we have VBS? Oh, I don't have a VBS account. Let's see. Ministry expenses. All right, it will give me, whoops, a little, I wonder if we don't have enough in unrestricted. That's weird. We should. I'll have to look into that. The memo's not working, so it may not have updated. But we can say here, this is a VBS starter kit. And we're doing this, yeah, I thought it was the date. That's okay. We won't put the check number in yet. We'll just do a direct unrestricted to ministry expense, $125, and save that. Now, when I make that change, you can see that that already occurred. I'll get a 1 up here under the checking. Let's go back into the general view so we can see that line item. So here's the VBS starter kit. You can see here this is not printed. When I go to the print queue, it shows me everything that's available. And so when I click here and I click print, it'll take me to this print view, which is that this is a top check, which puts the details below in the lower 2/3. And when I go to print, it'll say, what check number do I want? And 1254, confirm that. And then it'll print out for me. Or it'll go to my browser print so that I can print it myself. There we go. It doesn't print out immediately, so because it has to use the print drivers here. All right, so that's how you do a check and get back in here. The last thing for our time-saving tools that I want to show today, and I'm just checking my outline to make sure, actually there's 2 things, and they're tied together. So we talked about how you share access, not reports. We have a variety of reports within here. We have our general ledger, income and expense, charts of accounts, balance sheet. When you click on general ledger, it gives you all of the details, and then you can filter down by payee. You can filter down by fund and say, okay, which miscellaneous expenses have we sent, or ministry expenses, sorry, that's what it was, to Concordia Publishing House. It'll show that. You can also group it. So if you have multiple payees showing, you can group it in that way. Income and expense is exactly what you would think. It shows you your income accounts and your expense accounts and shows how you compare to budget and how you compare at the bottom line. Oh, there we go. All right, so there's the budget versus actual. Now the remaining, if you don't have a budget, and will show up negative, that you don't have any. So that's just where that red number is coming from. So then you have chart of accounts and balance sheet as well as event log. So all of that is very good and helpful, and you can print that out and share it. But that takes time, that takes paper, that takes inks and distribution time, figuring out, you don't usually have those people sitting there. You have to make sure to bring it to the church council meeting or the finance board meeting. What we recommend is that you actually create users for the people who need that information. And you may be thinking, well, no, I can't just let everybody get into my general ledger. We agree. So what you can do is you can create roles. And you have this first role that's administrator. And so we'll click add new one and say ministry leader. And say this role applies to general books. If you have multiple books, then you can pick which ones. Well, we don't want them to manage chart of accounts. We don't want them to manage recurring transactions. We don't even want them to view all the accounts. We just want them to view some accounts. And then we transactions they're not doing it. So hit submit. And when we come back here, it's a little quirk that in order to make the select accounts link show, then you click on that after you create it. And we'll let that pop up. And then you pick which accounts you want that person to see. So I can go under cancer care restricted and cancer care ministry. And I can show those 2 accounts. And you have the listing of all of these different ones. But you don't need to pick all of them. You can pick as many as are necessary. So we'll close out on there and click submit. So it shows you the accounts above that. So 3 selected accounts. Let me share that. So you get this central trust checking because you can see cancer support. All right, now when you go into users, you could create a new user. We'll do our email address that is general for us. CTS community. Oops, I did that right. I put it in there. Add a new one and then say ministry leader and hit submit. Now that email address will receive an invitation, and when they sign up, they can log in, but they can only see those 2 accounts that we put in there. And so for those people who only need to know their account balances, you can do that. For the people who need to be able to see the reports, that can be a different role that you set up. So if you go into roles, you may want to add one, we'll just go here, where they may not be able to create transactions, but they can view all accounts. Things like that will allow them to see the reports. And so for all congregation reports, that's how you'd set that up. Now the other thing you can do is you can create multiple roles and then assign those roles to people 2 or 3 at a time, so they get the sum of all of that. So if some people need some information and a subset of that needs a different set, you don't have to create a role for every person. You can create the roles based on the needs and apply multiple roles to people. All right, so I am 1 minute past my time. That's not too bad. I've got a couple questions in the queue, so before I get to those, I'm going to go back to my presentation and give a few words from our sponsors, which is us. If you'd like to start a free 37-day trial, if you haven't already started using Ledger, you can do that at 360ledger.com. You may ask, why is it a 37-day trial? Well, it's because we want to make sure you get your month end in there. And so if you time it right, you can get a month and a week. And that gives you that time to kind of reconcile everything. So 37-day trial. If you are not currently a customer, you can sign up by the end of February and we'll waive the startup fee. This is a popular promotion we do a couple times a year. It just creates an ideal opportunity to sign up. So that's coming through February 28th. And if you want to reach out to anybody, there's our contact information. My email and phone number is right there. Our software consultants, they can help you get up and running and walk you through the process, see if it's a good fit for your congregation. All right, let's get into question and answers. All right, Charlene has a few here. We currently have Shepherd Staff software. We pay our bills online through our bank, but also write physical checks. Currently, we enter each of those under checks. I assume with 360, the payments we make online will be under the payment tab, and our handwritten checks would be under checks. Correct. You are correct. Let me go show that one more time just to show you how that works. But yes, absolutely correct. So when you go to a new transaction and do a payment, you have these fields: memo date, payee, asset or liability, expense or liability. When you switch that to a check, that top portion stays just the same, and you get this extra portion on the bottom that starts to show you how to write the check. Now, you don't actually have to print the check. You mentioned in there handwritten checks. You can create them as checks, which means you can assign numbers to them, and then when you go into the check queue, you can just mark it as printed. Now, we actually require you to mark all checks as printed, even if you print from your computer, to clear out of the queue. And there's 2 reasons for that. One, not every check gets printed. Like Charlene's saying, they handwrite their checks. The other thing is that sometimes it doesn't print right the first time. If your printer jams, you may need to put it in a different check. And so we wait until it's done before marking it as cleared. So you tell us when it's cleared, we'll clear it out of the queue. So that's a great question. And then Charlene also has another question related to Shepherd Staff. Can everything we currently have in Shepherd Staff be imported into 360? Almost. Let me explain. In your chart of accounts, you'll notice that we have assets, liabilities, income, and expense. Oops. Did I click on that? Yeah, it looks like it's going. In Shepherd Staff, there is a 5th kind of account. dedicated accounts, which actually are in Church360 Ledger restricted funds. Now in Shepherd Staff, that's 5 account types. In Ledger, there's 4. The way the transactions work, we can't convert those credits and debits over. And this is really a better way of doing it. As we've talked with other accountants and worked on it, even our Shepherd Staff team agrees that, you know, if we could do it this way, this is a better solution. We can't convert those transactions over because of the credits and debits. So what we will allow for those, if you're using dedicated accounts, is you can bring over your chart of accounts, assign your dedicated accounts to assets, and start with the correct balances and payees and everything else that comes with it. You won't get the transaction history, but you'll get the other stuff. If you don't use dedicated accounts right now, then it's really easy to import everything, and we'll import your transactions too. So it just depends on the situation of the church. I always recommend, regardless, to start looking at switching to Church360 Ledger at the beginning of a fiscal year. And so we recommend that, you know, you start a few months early, you build up your chart of accounts, you test it, you learn it, you get ready to go. So day 1 of your fiscal year, you're able to start entering those transactions. So that's my recommendation with that. But yeah, to answer your question, most of the stuff will come over from Shepherd Staff, but especially if you have no dedicated accounts. All right. Well, I hope that answers your questions, Charlene. I have no other questions in the queue, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up for today. Let me go ahead and put my contact information back on the screen. If you'd like to reach out to me, peter.frank@cph.org is the best way to get a hold of me. Otherwise, you can call me at that phone number, and if you have to leave a message, I always try to get back as soon as I can. I'm almost at 100% within 24 hours. So just a few days of unexpected PTO have pushed me out from that. So I always like to talk with you, so please don't hesitate to reach out at all. So thank you very much for coming today. I'm going to put this right back up on the screen too, in case you need that. I hope you learned a little bit about how to use Church360 Ledger, and hopefully you learned a lot about all the time-saving tools that are included in that. So thank you again, and have a great rest of the day. Bye.